it was 3. I don't know where that minute or that hour went, but it disappeared quick. Doesn't. All right. We will be looking today at Isaac and Rebekah. Handout in the back of Rebekah and of Esau, and we'll be looking at Jacob and his kids next week. That begins a whole nother saga in the book of Genesis. Sarah dies at the end, or in the chapter 23 of Genesis, at the age of 127. She died real young. And her husband, Abraham, at 137, begins to mourn his beloved wife. And Isaac, at the age of 37, 36, loses his mother. After they bury Sarah, Abraham realizes that Isaac needs a wife. And Abraham looks around at the women and the people of the land that he is sojourning in and decides that's not where he wants to get a wife from for his son. So he sends his lead servant back home, back to his people, back to the land of Haran, in order to get and find a wife. The servant asks lots of questions. He wants to make sure he understands his task. And he asks, well, what happens if she won't come back with me? Should I go and take Isaac back to where she's living? He says, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If she refuses to come with you, then you're released from this oath. But I need you to go and find a wife for Isaac. He makes his way up to Mesopotamia, up to around the area of Haran, to a city known as Nabor. He gets to the well. We're not told how many servants go with him, but there's 10 camels. I don't know if you guys know much about camels. Camels are interesting creatures. They are built for the desert. They are built for the desert. A camel doesn't actually store water in its hump. Instead, it stores fat supplies and resources for long journeys. It has a hoof that is able to keep itself supported on the soft sand. It is able to travel 40 miles an hour if need be, but not for long distances. Can carry 400 pounds each and can travel up to 100 miles in a good day. In harsher conditions, it can make 25 miles. They store fat, not water, in their hump, which they're able to then use as energy when food is scarce, because the desert is known for all of its lush grasslands. And it can ignore its thirst while it's traveling, and then it can drink up to 20 gallons of water when it finally gets where it's going. Okay. Interesting. That was not something that came up in my research, but I will trust you. Yeah. Seal it back up. Well, and camels are used for meat as well. Yeah. Yeah, so camels are amazing creatures. We're not told how many servants go with him, but we have 10 camels. When they finally get where they're going, up into Mesopotamia, the servant gets to the well and he begins to pray for success of his trip. He prays to God that God would supply and guide him to the right woman, and that God would make it clear to him who that woman is. He says, let her come to this well. Let her give me a drink of water when I ask. And let her go ahead and water the camels as a sign that this is indeed the woman. As he is finishing his prayer, up comes Rebekah. And Rebekah does just that. Now this is impressive. When you think about a camel that's been on a journey, can drink 20 gallons of water. You figure a man needs a half gallon of water. You figure maybe there's a servant per camel plus the lead servant, just general math assumptions. You're talking about around a ton of water, literally. Like we're talking about 1,700 pounds of water that needs to be got. 200 gallons is approximately 200 gallons of water that she could be getting. So we're not talking about a small feat. And it makes sense that the servant, as he gets to this place, is like, maybe we could find somebody who could also, water the camels, just that minor, task. 200 gallons per camel times 10.
There's 200 gallons, but a gallon of water weighs 8 pounds, so 8 times 200 is 1,600
pounds. A ton in pounds. Right. Yep. Thanks for the clarification. Yes. Yes. So 200 gallons of water weighing approximately 8 pounds a gallon. The math works out to approximately 1,700 pounds of water, which I know that's not how we normally think about water. But when you're carrying 200 gallons, you start thinking about the pounds real quick, right? So she gathers this water. Maybe she has some servant girls that go with her and help her gather this water. We're not told. As he watches in amazement, he then puts gifts upon her, ring and bracelets, and he asks, "Who are you? What is your family origin?" If you have your hand out, it'll be a little more easy if you look at Abraham's family tree. Abraham had 3 brothers: Abraham, Nabor, and Haran. Out of Nabor, we have Bethel, who then had Rebekah. So it is Abraham's niece, great niece, that is Rebekah. So the servant immediately finds himself in Abraham's extended household. He asks for her hand. Rebekah gives it. She goes willingly. She makes her way back, though there is some there's no eagerness for them to lose their daughter. They want her to stay around. The servant is like, "Nope, I've had success on my journey. Let's make our way back." They make their way back. And as Rebekah approaches the land where Abraham is settled, she sees him in a distance, and it's this romantic movie, right? She's like, "Who is that tall, dark, handsome fellow over there?" And, "Oh, that's my servant Isaac." And she covers up, and they get married, and they fall in love. It really is a love, a genuine love seems to form out of this marriage. I did not find where Rebekah's age is given, but Isaac is 40 at this point. So a couple years has passed since his mother's passing, and Isaac is comforted in this new relationship that he has, and he takes her into his family, and she lives there. But we have some parallels between Isaac and Rebekah and Abraham and Sarah, because Rebekah is barren in a very similar way that Sarah was barren. It's actually 20 years that go by. Now you think about this. We have a son of promise through whom a multitude is going to be born. Right? And God has been very clear. It's not through Ishmael, it's not through these other kids, it's going to be through Isaac that this promise comes. And here Isaac is, and he receives his bride. And God is very clearly involved in this bride being Isaac's bride. And she's barren. Where are these kids going to come through the son of promise? And Isaac prays to God and beseeches God that he would grant them a child. And God answers that prayer 20 years later. When this finally comes up, when they finally have this baby on the way. Now you remember, there's no ultrasounds, there's none of that stuff, right? Rebekah has a really hard time with this pregnancy. It is a tough pregnancy on her. It's a challenge for her. And she goes to God and she asks God, what is going on? Now I mentioned, I think last week, that Alyssa really relates to this, because we had chosen to go with a midwife and do very little care and very little intervention with the girls, assuming it was a singleton. So we didn't have an early ultrasound. We didn't know that there was twins. The most high-tech thing we did until, I think it was around, was it week 20? 30? Week 30? The most high-tech thing we did was a blood draw, so we knew we were having girls. Or we thought we were having a girl. But Alyssa's, feeling out the baby. She's like, okay, there's feet up here, there's a head down here, there's another. What is this? Right? And I'm like, no, there's not room in there for twins. And she's like, well, I don't disagree that there's not room, but I think there is twins, or we're dealing with a velociraptor. So we went and had the ultrasound, and the tech was very frustrated with us because she got done with one ultrasound, realized there was two in there, and then had to start her job over again. She was very frustrated with us. Our work really began after that. All right, so we went for twice a week ultrasounds and observations. There was problems with the blood flow of the cord, and lots of drama, wondering, when we need to have these babies, right? And making sure that everybody was safe and doing well. Rebekah didn't have any of that. All she knows is this is hard. And as a father of twins twice, I can tell you that the morning sickness off of elevated hormones and things like this was a hard pregnancy for her. So she asked, what's going on? Why is this so hard? I have longed for this day for so many years. Now it's finally here, and I would rather be dead than dealing with this. And God comes to her and says, you have two babies. There are two nations in your womb, and they are currently already in conflict. Now, this is something that I can tell you from both pregnancies that we have had, both sets of twins we have had, is the demeanor of the child in the womb has stayed consistent out of the womb. Sylvie and Susanna and their relationship in the womb has very much followed outside the womb. They come pre-programmed. There was no blank slates with those two, I can tell you that. And the same is true of Shepherd and Selah. They came pre-programmed, right? And they had Selah and Shepherd, they like to cuddle in the womb. Shepherd got really excited anytime there was food, on the way down. He got really excited, started bouncing around. But Selah was real reserved and very cuddly of her brother, and that has continued. Rebekah had the opposite issue. They were fighting in the womb. Now, when she finally has these babies, it's also a difficult birth, because you have Jacob coming out right after Esau, holding his brother's heel. Now, I don't know how much you guys remember about the birthing process, but the arm is not supposed to come out. That is not a good sign. It's supposed to be the head first, and the arms are supposed to be, tucked down, and there's not a whole lot of wiggle room in there. To get an arm out first is not a good situation. And the next twin pregnancy that we will look at with Judah and, what's her name? Tamar. That one's weird too, because out comes a hand, and then in goes the hand, and then out comes the other baby. That ain't supposed to happen either. Trust me, that's not supposed to happen. So out comes these two babies. Now, Esau comes out red and hairy. Isaac comes out pale and smooth-skinned. Now, what I can tell you is that if baby A and baby B stay relatively in their proper positions, you're going to have baby A be a little bit larger, a little stronger, a little more further along, and then baby B is going to be a little bit smaller and a little bit more in need of care, right? Now, that overall was the case for the girls. Because Susanna was in distress in the womb, her body knew that she needed to grow quickly, so her lungs were pretty well developed. Sylvie had enough of that she was also ready to come out when she came early. But Sylvie did need a little bit of oxygen. Susanna just needed to be out. She was a fighter. She was a fighter. As far as exactly what the medical situation of these twins are is quite a mystery. There's a lot of debate. I read one article this week that said that they were identical twins with twin-to-twin transfusion syndrome, and that would have caused Esau to have a way elevated red blood cell count, resulting in him coming out red and hairy. And because of the challenge on Jacob, he would have come out quite a bit smaller and pale and more sickly. That would somewhat track, and that in time they would have become more similar than different. It's also possible they were not identical twins. And they could have still had some of those same characteristics. So who knows? But there's some interesting science and debate as to exactly what's going on there. Esau comes out hairy. He's a hunter, and he's favored by his father. And there is favoritism in this family. Jacob comes out grabbing his brother's heel, a smooth man, favored by his mother, probably a little bit smaller, probably a little more weak, but by no means unable to make up for that with his veracity. Jacob eventually buys his brother's birthright as a firstborn by X amount of minutes with a bowl of soup. Esau sells his birthright as the oldest son by a few minutes for a bowl of soup. He's hungry. He's been out hunting. He's gone out too long. And that soup just smells too good, right? So that's kind of what's going on here. Now, one of the things as a father of twins I can tell you is it's all hands on deck when there's twins. When one baby needs held, the other baby often needs held. It makes a lot of sense to me that one parent would take one child and the other parent would take the other child, And it would make a lot of sense to me that Jacob, being twin B, probably needing a little more care, being a little more fragile, would have spent more time with his mother, just naturally. So I think that's probably, this is my assumption, I think that's where this favoritism came from. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it was by any means healthy within the family. I'm saying it's an explanation possibly for why there was this favoritism. So we have these two boys being raised in this household, Abraham's household. Abraham is quite wealthy, right? He sent 10 camels, each capable of carrying 200 pounds, with gifts to receive Rebekah. 20 years have passed. I'm sure that wealth is continuing to occur. They're well off. There's probably others who can help, but Jacob seems to, or Isaac seems to take quite a bit of time and interest and care in taking care of Esau, and Rebekah obviously is very attuned to caring for Jacob, and that is kind of what naturally comes. Now, the prophecy, when Rebekah asked, okay, what is going on? She was told that there's 2 nations inside your womb, and the older will serve the younger. I don't know how much of that she then told to Isaac or to the boys, but it plays into at least her actions later on, and we'll get to that stealing of the birthright in earnest next week. Or not the birthright, the blessing, and those two things are different. Isaac, in Genesis chapter 26, receives the Abrahamic blessing after his father's passing. God says, I'm going to be with you just like your father. You're going to be a great nation. A great multitude is going to come from you, and follow me. And Isaac does. But he also falls in line with his father when he goes to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, instead of going down to Egypt like his father during another drought. And he says that Rebekah is his sister, just like his father. And just like the king of Egypt was very frustrated, so was Abimelech. Why would you lie to me like this? We are not told that this was a mistake by Isaac. God does not reprimand Isaac for this. But you're supposed to know that that wasn't supposed to happen. That was not right. It's one of the key features, especially the book of Genesis. It's a historical narrative. It tells you what happened. It doesn't necessarily call balls and strikes. It simply just tells you what took place. You're supposed to know. You shouldn't say that your wife is your sister. And you see the problems that come out of that. But in very much the same way, father like son, he falls into that as well. Abimelech and Isaac and their horde of folks continue to be in conflict. Abimelech is an uneasy enemy, or maybe an uneasy friend, to the point that Isaac, in looking for space for his flocks and his herds, are run off of a couple additional wells of water, needing more space. Eventually, Abimelech comes to Isaac, and Isaac says, why are we here to have conflict? And Abimelech says, God is clearly with you. We want peace, because obviously we can't overcome you. So they make a peace. They make a pact. And God allows Isaac to be at peace with his enemies. God makes peace and provides for Isaac in the midst of hostile forces around him and takes care of him. Conflict begins to arise when Esau gets to age over his first wife. Causes quite a bit of conflict in the woman that he chooses as his first wife. Just as way of going over the person of Esau, because we're going to be focusing on Jacob kind of going forward, but Esau is an important character, not only in the story arc of this family, but in the biblical story arc. Esau will end up marrying 3 different women in an attempt to make his family happy, trying to find that woman that's going to get along with the in-laws. He will be robbed of his blessing, which seems to make more of a difference for him than his birthright that he sold. You can also see the just the heartbreak in Esau as he stands there and asks his father, "Do you not have a blessing left for me?" You know, and in very much the favoritism that Isaac was showing towards Esau comes back to bite him, because he's like, I've made him Lord of you. I've blessed him with everything, and there is very little that you will have. You will prosper, but you're going to live in... I don't know what's going on with the mic this morning. You're going to live in the desert. You're going to be wrestling for the scraps. And it really frustrates Esau. And Esau says, as soon as I get done mourning my father's death, and he thought his father's health had declined so much that his death was imminent. That was why the blessing was being given. He said, as soon as I'm done mourning my father, I am killing my brother. I'm going to kill him. And he was serious. He was deadly serious. And Rebekah hears about this, learns about this, and has to send Jacob away. And that's going to become the saga that we're then going to be following next week. Esau is going to become a great nation out of these 3 wives that he has. He's going to have a number of kids who are going to rule the southern part of the Dead Sea. And Esau will eventually become the nation of Edom. Edom meaning red. We have Edom playing a prominent role in the Exodus, because as Israel is coming up to the promised land, they have to go through Esau's land, through Edom, and the Edomites say, no, we don't care if you're going to just stay on the road. We don't care that you're going to pay us for water. We don't care that you're going to pay us for food. You cannot come through here. We don't trust you. And most of the time when that happens, God says, all right, get them. Let them have it. I'm with you. But this is his brother. You don't mess with your brother. You go around. You find another path, because we're not going to have conflict with Esau, with Edom. Edom and Israel have a very tenuous relationship. And God gets very frustrated with Edom for seeing the judgment that is placed upon Israel for their abandonment of God and joining in and adding to the pain. Esau takes advantage of the Assyrian and the Babylonian captivities. And God says, you shouldn't have done that. I was dealing with Jacob. I was dealing with Israel. But you shouldn't have joined in on your brother. And as a result, Esau and his descendants are punished. And they become scarce. They lose their land. Eventually, you have King Herod the Great, a descendant of Esau, sitting on the throne of Israel. And it makes King Herod very uneasy because he knows the prophecies. He knows that he shouldn't be ruling over Israel. And yet here he is ruling over Israel. And when he hears that the Messiah is coming, he's rightly concerned. I'm not saying he is justified in the killing of the boys of Bethlehem, but he is rightly concerned by what's going on. But, King Herod is an interesting case. He's an interesting study. So that's some of the story of Esau. Esau does mellow out. Of course, he greets his brother warmly when Jacob does return. But there continues to be a very adversarial relationship between not only these brothers, but also their descendants that will come out of this. Rebekah, some meanings of names here as we close. Isaac, of course, means laughter, right? His parents waited long for him, and when they finally hear that they're going to have a baby at the very young age of 90 and 100, there's laughter. There's a little bit of really now of all times. So Isaac means laughter. Rebekah means captivating, or to bind and secure. Esau comes out hairy and is named hairy. Esau means hairy. Edom means red. Jacob is heel holder or supplanter. So there's this idea of a trickster, right? He is a Loki type of fellow. But his name is eventually changed to Israel, and Israel means God prevails. What happens when Jacob is wrestling with the angel and he gets this name? He has striven with God, he has striven with man, and has prevailed. He has overcome. So that is the meaning of these names. All right, that basically brings us to the blessing that we will begin to look at next week. So that's kind of where I wanted to get to in our discussion this morning. Questions, comments, quandaries? I think everybody else is missing that hour too. I have reprinted all of the handouts up till now and have them all somewhat organized back there. So if you are missing one or you have any questions about any of the handouts, you're welcome to those. Like I said, next week we're going to be looking at Genesis 28 and following, and it gets to be an interesting story as we look at the tribe of Israel that comes out of Jacob, the supplanter. He's an interesting fellow. His veracity and his cunning, and then it comes back to bite him because it runs in the family. It runs in the family, and his uncle Laban is also a cunning man and a supplanter. I don't know. I mean, Ruel kind of maintains his kingdom his descendants kind of maintain that kingdom a little bit better than the rest of them do. You look at this map over here, they all kind of fall into and under that area. I don't know a whole lot about the chiefs of Edom, or the chiefs of Esau and his kids. I just know that they continue to be a people group that the scriptures continue to point back to. They continue to play a role. And God gets, it's interesting whether you're looking at the kids of Edom, or you back up and you look at the extended family with Moab and the Ammonites, the Edomites and Israel, and the Ishmaelites. These families, right, the heads of these families and the tribes that come from them really do run this area of the world. And the way that they treat each other, God very much says, you're family. We're talking about lots of generations, lots of kids later, lots of political stuff that arises and falls, and God very much says, you're family. So I think the lesson that we get there is we are all of the same people, right? Regardless of how different we might look, regardless of who you are or are not related to, we're all family, right? And God, while He very much keeps that one family tree and holds them very much accountable for their relation to each other, I think the overall lesson is we're all family, right? You go back, I know there was some debate when we were looking at the creation, some people going, where did all these people come from? Well, even if you want to claim that it's not just Adam and Eve and there were other people made or created or however, you eventually get back to the flood and Ham, Shem, and Japheth. And the scriptures are very clear that we all come from those three lines. So we're not going to get out of the fact that we're all related. There's no way around it scripturally. We're all related. And God very much says, you treat each other like family. Now we all know, after 3 days, family starts to stink kind of like fish, but we're supposed to be kind and respectful towards our family, even with the conflicts that come with those complicated relationships. So I guess in answering your question, like a good politician, Arnold, I don't know a whole lot about Esau and his descendants. I know that there's a time when Edom had more power, and then when Israel overcame Esau, and then eventually when King Herod, the last Edomite that I know about, was ruling over Israel. So that's kind of the story arc, but I don't know a lot of the specifics about these different kings and characters. Right. If you go back, right, one of the handouts that I have is page 14 and 15 on the second handout on Abraham. And I have the nations of Abraham and Lot. And there's a map there that I created trying to kind of show where their regions are. And that kind of shows that Edom was more just south of the Dead Sea. Whereas the map today that shows kind of his clans are more around the base of the Dead Sea. So that kind of shifts down. But also there's the 12 tribes of Ishmael that then kind of become the Arab states down there in modern day Iran. right? The Iran and down that side of the desert, right? So we really do have, I mean, you look at that map with Israel and with the Ammonites and the Moabites and Edom and then the Ishmaelites. I mean, they're covering and controlling a huge swath there. And one of the things to keep in mind is there is two major trade routes that go from Asia to North Africa and to Europe. They go right through there. Whoever controls those trade routes, right? So when you see King Solomon controlling the trade routes, gold was the only currency of worth because silver was just over in abundance, right? Esau and the Edomites really do continue to control that trade route and became a very powerful and wealthy nation despite being up high in the desert mountains and hills. And it all kind of comes down to the fact that there's those two trade routes that kind of go through there and go towards Egypt. And if you control those trade routes, you know, you control the tariffs, you know, the taxes, yeah, you make off pretty well. You also make off pretty well with all the people traveling in and through that you can then, you know, they need to eat, they need to drink, they need entertainment, right? I mean, lots of ways to make money off of that system that kind of travels through there. But yeah, you have the 12 nations of Ishmael, you have the nation of Israel, and you have the nations of Edom. And then if you back up, of course, you have the Moabites and the Ammonites, and those all come out of those, you know, that family of Israel, that family of Abraham. And when you look at the family tree, you know, we don't know exactly what control Nabor and his descendants kind of had up there in Mesopotamia, right? I don't know a whole lot about that, but you know, they're controlling a good. That one family has a lot of influence just out of those few folks. Yes. 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 Oh, absolutely. That's a great point to end on. It really is, because Isaac being born to a woman in her 90s is a miracle. Jacob surviving as possibly a very weak twin without all the medical care is a miracle. Right? The fact that both of these come out of dead wombs, right, barren women, are miracles. Right? The fact that Jacob did not tear himself apart in marrying these four women and the conflict therein. I mean, this whole thing is a miracle. It really is. It really is. All right, let's go ahead and put a pin in it there. If you have other thoughts and comments, you're welcome to come and talk to me. But let's put a pin in it there. We'll get ready for worship and drink some more coffee, because we did lose that hour. Father, we come before you today. We thank you for all that you do. We thank you for the blessings that you provide. As we continue to study your word, we are struck by your provision, by how your hands were at work in saving us and protecting us and providing for us, and we're grateful for that. Help us to constantly be seeking you knowing that our provision ultimately does come from you and that we're dependent upon you. Forgive us when we fall short. We love you, Father. It's in your Son's name I ask and pray. Amen.